It's our first beauty and book club, and we have a thriller to kick things off this week. The reason why this is a book club is because I have ADHD and a poor memory, so if I forget anything, we discuss in the comments. And it's called All Good People Here by Ashley Flowers, who is actually a podcast host, a crime podcast host of Crime Junkie. Book is true, not true. This book is fiction. But this book is based on crime, and I want to give a warning immediately, that it is a very dark, twisted tale, and it is not for the faint of heart because it is about children. Basically everything I can warn you for, you're going to need a warning for, just heads up. But that being said, I do have a very difficult time with stuff that is too dark in those areas, but I didn't find this was it was horrible, but I could get through it. It's actually very, very relatable to a true crime story, which is that of JonBenet Ramsey. It's Ashley Flowers' first book. It was released last year. It had me hooked from the very start. I listened to this on audiobook in 2 days, and I loved the voices. The voices were great for the audiobook. It felt very comforting and familiar. It starts off with this woman who is now a grown adult woman. Her name is Margot. So she is going back to small town where she grew up until she was only about 11 years old. She moved abruptly out of this town because her parents, there's a lot of storylines here. You're gonna be confused. I'm still confused. Basically, her parents were going through some stuff, I think alcoholism, maybe some anger issues, stuff like that going on. So they abruptly leave town when she's about 11, but she goes back to visit her uncle Luke. They were like this. They were very, very, very close growing up. She was very close to her uncle. He was like a second father to her, or the father she never had type thing. He now has dementia. He's losing his memory. He's having a lot of trouble keeping up with daily life. So she goes back to small town Wallapalooza or something like that in Indiana. Please don't judge me. This is book club. There's no shaming anybody here. She's going to take care of him because he's really struggling. His wife passed away, his wife Rebecca. She passed away last year. And he's struggling to keep up with all of the tasks of his house and his health and his care. So she moves in, and she is plagued by the history of one of her best friends from her childhood, a little girl named January, who was murdered. She has grown up obsessed with this story. They were 6 years old when she was found in her home, or she was found by her home, and she had lost her life. Margot lady has grown up to become a journalist, and she researches all these true crime stories, and she's a writer, and she goes to help her uncle, but she's also, timing wise, arriving right at the time where the nearby town, which is only a few kilometers away, except miles, is the missing little girl has happened in a town over. Now, it has been 20 odd years since the little girl who she was friends with, January Jacobs, has been murdered, but she cannot let it go. Every story that she's researched as a journalist, she has always tied it back to January in some way or another, almost to the point where it's a bit of an obsession. So she gets back, she's helping Luke on the news. Oh my gosh, a little girl named Natalie in the next town over has gone missing. She went missing from a playground. Margot, the journalist, wants to research this story. She goes to her work and she says, I'd like to research this. And they say, look, that's fine. You're there. We get it. Do it. But don't tie this too closely to January Jacobs, okay? Because you have had quite the obsession with all of your pieces in January. Let's just try to let this be a standalone project. And she says, okay, great. Guess what happened? She didn't do that. She made the story too much about January, and she was making big leaps and jumps in her accusation, sort of, and tying this together as if it's the same person all these years later. And so her work has to call her up, and they say, we're so sorry, but we have to let you go. we know you're going through some stuff, you're taking care of your uncle and all of that, but it's just not working out. So she's devastated because she's also trying to find a subletter for her apartment back where she lives. Also, I forget where she lives, if anybody knows. And she had one lined up, and turns out he didn't pay that month's rent. So her landlord is calling her saying, hey, girlie, I need some money. And she's trying to locate her subletter, can't get a hold of them. There's a little bit of money in the bank. So she says, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks, 2 weeks before I look for another job. And I'm going to go all in on these missing girls' stories. And I swear they're connected. I have to know. She becomes entrenched with these stories, and it's sort of taking a toll on her mental health. She's going a little like loopy, thinking somebody's following her. Crime in the small town that they live in. The family of January Jacobs, who was the little girl originally who was found murdered, they get vandalized. They are farmers. They are a husband and a wife, and the husband's name is Billy. The wife's name is Chrissy. So there's this other storyline going on. We're flashing back to 1990s, 1980s, where Billy and Chrissy fell for each other one summer. He was a quiet farmer boy. She was like the cheerleader gal who wanted to break out of this small town. But guess what happens? Chrissy ends up pregnant. So she goes to Billy and she says, I want to terminate this pregnancy. Well, that's what she wanted to say, because Billy's family came from money. His parents had passed on in a car accident, and he was set to inherit the whole farm from his grandparents. She tells him she's pregnant, and he's like, great, this is great. I'm so happy. I love you. We've been dating all summer. Let's get married. He proposes. She says yes, because she's sort of torn. She does like him. She wants to get out of this small town though, and he has other plans. He has to stay and take care of the farm. She doesn't love that idea, but also she kind of has the things she's always wanted, because they have money, they have a content life, things are gonna be fine. Spoiler, they are also having twins. They're having boy-girl twins. And so she's like, you know what? Okay, let's do it. So they do it. They get married. They start to live their life. And something that you're going to hear about throughout the storyline is that they used to be friends with some of their friends from high school. Now, they were young parents. I think they were 18 when they had their twins. So the twins' names are January and Jace. Very cutie pies, little green eyes, stuff like that, little dimples in their chin. And Billy and Chrissy kind of stop hanging out with their friends from high school because they've moved on to this family life and blah, blah, blah. One of their best friends was a guy named Dave. Dave was around all the time. The three of them were the three buddies, but they have to cut ties because life moves on. Okay, to 2019. Margot's now living with her uncle Luke. She's trying to investigate these murders. She's getting a little stressed out. Somebody's following her. She gets a note left on her car. It's not safe here. She gets another note left on her front porch. Get out. Word of where the twin brother is from the original story of the poor girl who was found murdered. This story is kind of crazy as well. The mother wakes up one morning, spray paint all over the wall in the hallway that says, that bee is dead, thankfully, or something. And the mom calls the police, and the police come, and the parents have no idea what's going on, but their daughter is missing. Their son is still in his bed, and they're hysterical, obviously. At this point, you're also introduced to a lot of characters. You're introduced to police. You're introduced to old friends. We're introduced to the family who goes on the news and does some appearances on TV, because that's what their people are saying they should probably do, so that they'll garner sympathy, because the police also start looking into the family, because immediately when crimes do tend to happen, sometimes they look, you know, it's always the husband or whatever. Always the parents, they're looking deep into them. Well, Billy, the husband, finds red spray paint on his wife's nightgown sleeve, and he hides it, but then later confronts her and says, what the heck is this? And she says, oh, I bumped into the wall when I woke up that morning. Obviously, it's nothing, yada, yada, yada. He doesn't quite trust her anymore. She doesn't trust their son. Jace. Let's focus on the kids for a minute. Something I failed to mention is that January and Jace, who are 6-year-old twins, January was the star of the show. She was a beautiful, spirited, happy little go-lucky girl who was a dancer. She did major performances in front of lots of people. She had star quality. Jace, the brother twin, did not have as much star quality to him. He was shy, he was reserved. He's a little bit of like a strange, shy child. He tried out for sports and it wasn't for him. He tried to go do things with his dad on the farm. It wasn't for him. He was an artist and he was very chill. He was a little bit jealous of his sister, who always got crazy attention, who always got people fawning all over her. He was made to sit and watch her at dance over and over again. So the night of her murder, Jace wakes up in the middle of the night and he goes down because he heard a noise. He goes downstairs and he finds his sister, January, dead at the bottom of their basement stairs. He goes down to her body and his mother wakes up at this time because she hears noises, and she finds Jace at the bottom of the basement stairs with his sister's body, and she thinks immediately he had something to do with this because it was just too sus. And so she's, spoiler alert, there's gonna be major spoilers here, she's the one. If you want to stop right now and go read the book and then come back, I'm okay with that. She's the one who spray paints the wall in their house. She's the one who covers up the murder thinking it was her son who did this, and she looks at her babies and she's so devastated, but she says, I'm not losing both of you. What she does is she moves the body, she dumps it in a ditch just down the road, she spray paints the wall, she goes to bed or she waits until like the morning, and she calls the police and she says, this is an emergency, I don't know what happened. God, where are we in this story? There's a lot of moving parts in this story. As Jace, the brother, grows up, he's still a very awkward, and he starts lashing out. He gets into trouble. He's getting into some fights. He's not comfortable in the town because the entire town believes that the family had something to do with the murder of this little girl. There's no more evidence that ever appears to point the finger at anybody else, even though the mom had spray painted the wall and smashed out a window to make it look like somebody was an intruder in their home. There's just mixed reviews that the town thinks, hey, they did it. Jace is growing up into an awkward teenager, and at 18 he says his mom is reserved, not outward loving him because she thinks he had something to do with the sister. The dad and him are not aligned. The dad's a farmer and he's an artist, and so he's feeling very unloved, very unwelcomed in this town. He moves away at 18 and he doesn't tell his parents where he goes. He's like, peace, I'm out of here. Back to current day, 2019, when we have this journalist, Margot, who's trying to investigate these stories of these missing girls. And she says, I'm tracking down Jace. She goes to visit his dad. He doesn't know where he is. But she finds out that every year there are flowers left on the grave of his sister January. So she goes down and she looks at the flowers, and on the bottom of the flower case, there is... there is a tag that says Chicago. So she figures out that this Jace guy is in Chicago. She goes all the way to Chicago to meet him. She's being followed by a woman with auburn hair, and she's freaked out about it, but she keeps on pushing through. And she goes to Chicago because she finds that Jace is going under a different name now. He's going under Jay, and he has like a different last name or something, but she finds the police records from when he was getting into trouble, and she narrows him down. She finds him. She finds out he works at like an art gallery. She goes there. She confronts him. Pretty bold of her, if you ask me. Also, the next thing she does is she goes to his apartment alone and like has a beer with him, and at this point she's thinking he murdered his sister. And also she knows he's had a violent past because he's been arrested for multiple things. I mean, nothing crazy, but like assaults and stuff. So she goes with him to his apartment because she's so desperate to find out what happened, because she's convinced herself that this is happening again. She right now kind of thinks he could be the murderer because he happened to be in town and leave flowers on the grave at the exact same time that the missing little girl a town over happened. She asks Jace and he straight up denies that he denies. I mean, he admits that he's had some issues over the years, but that's due to his messed up family life, and he straight up denies having anything to do with the death of his sister or these other little girls, because she kind of connects the dots that there's been missing little girls of a similar age and similar suspicious circumstances over a few towns nearby. But he says no, and he says, I'll tell you the truth of what happened. So he left town at 18, but a few years later he wanted, after getting a lot of therapy and stuff and also getting treatment, I think, for addictions, he wanted to reconnect with his family, his parents. That was all he had left, was his parents. And he wanted to reconnect because he was supposed to make amends. And so he wrote his mother a letter, and actually it kind of went off the rails and was a little bit accusatory and stuff. I don't know why you were so cold to me. I don't know why you stopped loving me. All of this stuff. The mother writes back and she says, because you killed your sister, basically. And he writes back again. It's like this, back and forth. And he will not give his phone number or where he's living. He has a P.O. box and all this stuff. So the mother's just desperately trying to reconnect. She's actually got another storyline going on at this point where she's gotten much older. Her and her husband Billy are no longer really a team. They haven't been since the murder of their daughter. She was never head over heels for Billy anyway. She was never really in love with him. But guess what? Spoiler alert, she's found love with another. And it's a woman. It's a girl who she went to high school with. They grew up and they're both married to men, but they meet each other in a town over in a bar and they start hanging out, and it's like love, like head over heels, can't wait to be together type thing. But they still remain secretive in their relationship because it's just not something that could come out in this small town, and they want to just continue to stay with their husbands and raise. The other woman has kids. Her name is Jody, and so they want to keep this a secret. Mama, Chrissy, is feeling brave. She hasn't had therapy, and I think she should have, but she has a new love who's kind of brought out her spirit again. She's brought her back to life after being, in this horrible nightmare of a life for so long. So she's feeling good and she wants to reconnect with her son. He says, I did not murder my sister. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mama says, what? All of these years I've treated you like this and it's not true? Which, that's a really, 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 really crazy accusation to just automatically be like, I see something, this is what happened. I mean, did you not ask him? And something that happened in the earlier days when they were on TV is that the son said something like, I don't want to talk about it, I'm scared I'll get in trouble or something. And so then everybody just assumed that this poor family murdered their daughter. Mama tells her girlfriend, her love of her life, the truth. She's like, I have to tell you the truth of what happened that night. Here's what happened. I woke up in the middle of the night. I found my son over my daughter. She had fallen down the stairs. She had banged her head. I didn't want to lose both my kids, so I covered it up. Girlfriend is like, I knew you didn't kill your daughter. She always believed that she didn't kill her daughter, but like, you gotta come out with this and talk to your son, because what the heck is going on here? It gives the mama the strength to try to connect with her son and tell him a bombshell that who he thinks his dad, Billy, is not the real dad. No. Real dad, Dave, the friend Dave. And she knows this. She also told her lover. She knows this because she had her period after she hooked up with her husband, and then she hooked up with Dave and she did not have her period. So she knows that the kids are Dave's because they also look like him. Green eyes, dimple in the chin. Yeah, that's all Dave. Mom is gonna tell son about that. Your father's not who you think he is. So she writes this in a letter and she says, I'm so sorry. I'm going to make this right. Your father is not who you think he is. It's Dave, yada yada. The mom then unalives herself. But, she does so in the foyer of her home, and there is a letter left that says, Dear Jace, I am so sorry. I am going to make the best of this, or whatever she said. I'm going to make this better. Everybody assumes she just couldn't live, you know, under this stress anymore, and that happened to her, and now it's just the husband who lives alone in this farmhouse. The son lives away, he doesn't come back. Margot, she is there with her Uncle Luke, and she had come home from talking with Jace in Chicago, and she's convinced that Jace is not the murderer, that the wife isn't the murderer, that the husband's not the murderer, that there is a different murderer on the loose. I mean, she always kind of assumed that, but now she's like confirmed it. And lo and behold, she's friends with a local sheriff. Now, to be honest, what the heck was this storyline even doing in here? Honestly, I don't even know why this storyline was in here because they gave us no closure on it. She's BFFs with a guy named Pete, who's a local cop, and she has him throughout the story, like big time he's involved, and then he just disappears. And no closure, no nothing. And I kind of resent that. Because I was like, okay, is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? The entire time I'm going, is he the good guy or the bad guy? The good guy or the bad guy? The good guy? We don't know. I guess he's good because he never came up in the end as a bad guy. The uncle is having a lot of breakdown issues. Pete's helping out. Margot goes outside to cry one night because the uncle, you know, is getting so bad that she got hit in the face by him by accident. He pointed a gun at her by accident. She also found a false bottom drawer in his desk that she was never allowed in when she was a kid. And there was pictures of January Jacobs in that drawer, or her dance competition pamphlets. And she's like, you told me you never knew January Jacobs, so why is there her pamphlets from dance here? And then she Googles her dance competitions and her uncle's in the background of the photos. And so she's getting really freaked out that her uncle could be the killer. Roller coaster, okay? This is why I couldn't put this down for 2 days. She goes outside to cry because she's like, what the frick is happening here? Is my uncle the killer? Is the family the killer? Is there a regular killer on the loose? She's also having a lot of like PTSD because she thought as a child, her whole childhood, like that this random person was haunting their neighborhood, and it could have easily been her. It could have been her as much as it was like he was playing eeny, meeny, miny, mo outside their houses, you know? Breaking down, all of a sudden, a hand clasps over her mouth. And this is so dramatic for what it is. Because a hand clasps over her mouth and a hand grabs her around the waist and they throw her into an SUV. And she's like, fighting back, I'm getting abducted, what's happening? And then she thinks it's a man who abducted her in a hoodie and all this stuff. And she hears the voice and it's a woman's voice. Well, this is the auburn-haired lady who had been following her around. Okay, so who is the auburn-haired lady? Okay. Do you know? Because I kind of figured it out throughout the time. It is Chrissy, the mother of the deceased 5-year-old. It is her lover. This is Jody. Enters Jody into the chat. She abducts Miss Margot, the journalist, because she has to share some news with her, but she's scared, okay? She's scared because this town is full of secrets. That's why its hair is so big. Takes the journalist to a random area, and she says to her, I have to tell you some information. I don't think my girlfriend killed herself. There's no way she would. Like, we had big plans to live our life together. This just doesn't make any sense. She was literally like going right back to her house, she said, so she would not have done this. Billy is not the dad of the twins. Dave is. So I already clarified that with you guys, right? But bombshell, bombshell, bombshell. This whole book is bombshell. Dave, friend Dave, is not Dave. It is Uncle Luke. His name is Luke Davies, and he's the baby daddy. And they called him Dave because his last name was Davies, because they also introduced these other high school friends, which again, there's no reason for all of these side stories. It's so confusing. But they called their high school friends by last names. I know character development is very important, but I just find like this book, the build up was so great. I couldn't put it down. But then the ending, I'm getting ahead of myself, but like, the ending was like rush. And it was interesting because I feel like they could have gone anywhere with this story. I mean, I became Margot, and I was accusing everybody. I was like, it could have been this person because they did this, and it could have been this person, it could have been that person, it could have been this person. Oh, it could have been random person who we haven't met yet, but it turns out to be the father of somebody. Like, it was crazy. This is when we find out that her uncle, who she loves and adores but has dementia, and he's also been calling her his deceased wife's name, and he kind of like said some stuff about January during those times, but he never clarified. But he was like, I'm worried that Margot's gonna find out the truth, and yada 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 yada. So we're kind of sus of him right now because he's also got a lot leaning against him that he could be a murderer, but there's no reason to believe that other than the paranoia that this town is creating amongst everybody. So where are we in the story? This is actually a great thing though, that she finds out that Luke, Uncle Luke, is the baby daddy of the twins, because this makes more sense as to why he was at January's dance recitals, and this makes more sense as to why he said he's worried people will find out and all of this stuff. This actually clears the air for him and clears his name. So we now realize he's not a murderer. He's just the baby daddy who could never have kids with his wife and was sad to not know his children from this relationship because Chrissy hid it. Another little bombshell that's happening is that journalist Margot is racking her brain about something that the twin brother Jay said. He said something about his sister having a imaginary friend named Elephant something, and he had really big ears, and for some reason this stuck in Margot's head and she just couldn't shake what this was bringing up for her. And then she realizes that when she was interviewing, this is all so random, but here we go, tied in a nice little bow. When she was interviewing about another little girl's disappearance, a little girl named Penny, well, he's a guy who's just sort of free, has no family, has no kids of his own, has no partner, and he travels a lot and moves different places. His name sounds exactly like her imaginary friend. The big ears, he had big old ears. This is all connecting something for Margot. She thinks, I found him, he's the murderer, because she Googles the dance pictures and she sees him in the background of January's dance recital. Okay, boom, bombshell, story's made, right? So she can't find this guy though, because he's moved on, because he moves a lot. But she tracks down his sister, and his sister lets some little tidbits out about how he has a storage unit. Margot goes and breaks in to the storage unit with Chrissy's lover because they're convinced that this guy murdered the girl. And what do they find? Bombshell, a box of trophies with all, it's so perfectly tied in a nice little bow because it's basically like a file folder with the names of all of his victims. Not funny, but the name, you know, when you're uncomfortable and you're just like, names of all of his victims, pictures, like trophies, like all of this stuff. He basically wrote the file and handed it to them, except they broke in and stole it. Yay, they make an anonymous note to the police come, they arrest this guy. Again, this is the ending and it wraps up so quickly. It's like boom, boom, boom. They arrest the guy, everything solved. Literally, it's like 16 things are solved at once. Wowee, no problems at all. But then Margot, the journalist, she just can't let go of some things. So she goes the next day, she had like no sleep now. She runs off, no sleep at all. The next day, She goes to Billy's farmhouse. She gets her job back. She writes this nice big article. She's the star of this operation because none of the other journalists knew any of this because she basically solved the crime. So she gets her job back and she wrote this big long article and she wants to give Billy a heads up about it. She wants to let him read it first. She left out some tidbits like Chrissy's relationship and stuff like that because it didn't really belong anywhere, and her friend Jody, the lover, it would interfere with her life and what's going on, and so she didn't say any of that, but she wrote about the murders and all of this stuff. She gives him the heads up. He's happy as can be to have this solved. He's thankful. He's offering coffee, which I thought again that this was going to be that he was drugging her or something, because there's just so much detail that you're just like, oh, okay, there was no point of that. Just it was just extra words, and everything's happening very quickly right now. Goes to leave the house and something's just not sitting right with her because she looks at a photo on the wall, and it's her little friend January when she was little, and she has in her hand a blanket. It was her baby blankie that she went everywhere with, and it made her brave. And the picture, she looks kind of scared and she's clinging to the blanket, and this just like snaps something in Margot's brain that she now does think Billy had something to do with either the death of his wife or the death of his daughter. I don't know if it's my ADHD that made me kind of like fog over during all these details, or if it wasn't super clear, but she's basically like, wait a minute, bad vibes, you had something to do with this. And he was like, and then she was like, I'm trying to leave the house, and then he's like, you're not going anywhere, because he did have something to do with it. He murdered his wife. When he found out, we actually now transport back to the final chapter epilogue where we get Billy's point of view. He actually knew that he wasn't the father of these twins since they were 6 years old, because Uncle Luke drunkenly kind of, or in like a state of like, he was very upset because his wife had a miscarriage and they couldn't have children, and he was very upset, and he said, you have everything, you are raising the kids, but they're my kids, or whatever. So Billy comes home from this get together and he's mad. He's really mad. He goes into the house and he hears some noise and he thinks it's his wife, and he's so pissed off. He thinks, maybe I'll just like push her down the stairs. So she's in the basement doing laundry, and he opens the door and swings it back real hard and bumps into something and knocks it down the stairs. Okay, it's not the wife, it's the little girl. It's poor little January, who had her blankie in the dryer and she couldn't sleep without it. And so he's upset now. He's thrown his daughter, who he's known to be his daughter since she was born, even if it's not biological. He's very upset because she's looks to be very badly injured. He runs down the stairs to her. She's not dead. She starts waking up and says, Daddy, what's going on? And he says, oh, okay, I'm going to call 911, blah, blah, blah. And she starts crying loudly, and he starts saying, no, you can't be crying loudly because you're gonna wake up your mom. And she's saying, Daddy hurt me, and he's saying, no, I didn't. And he's getting more angry because he's looking at this child who now he realizes is like his ex-best friend, and he's angry at his wife, and so he kills his own daughter. Oh, this story has so many twists and turns. Leaves her there. He put the little blankie in her hand though, and this was the final nail that made Margot, the journalist, understand that somebody who cared about this little girl must have been the one who murdered her, because she was holding onto her blankie and it wouldn't have remained in her hand unless somebody had placed it there. So he goes upstairs and pretends to go to bed until the morning when his wife finds her and freaks out and thinks it's the son, and then she tries to cover that up. So we just have a layer upon layer upon layer. The dad, the brother, the mom, I mean, everybody is doing everything they can to cover this up. And really, if they hadn't have done any of that from the start, I don't know, maybe the dad would have been racked with guilt and confessed. I don't know. He doesn't know the wife is going to do all that in the morning. He thinks they're just going to think she fell down the stairs and passed away. But because the mom did all this stuff to cover up for the brother, it's this unsolved murder that makes the town hate this poor family. And that, my dears, is the story of all good people here. Oh, I didn't finish that the dad, Billy, he is the one who also murders the wife. So we find out that he goes up to the wife and he shoots her in the foyer of their house because they have a bunch of guns there that were never locked up. And he's so mad at her, even though this is years and years and years later, she was gonna tell the son that he wasn't the real dad and all this stuff. So the Billy guy was really mad and he shoots her. So this guy's just like got really bad rage issues because he's now also gonna kill Margot the journalist to keep his secrets in check. But what I don't really get is that, what's he gonna say happened to Margot? Like, where's that storyline gonna go? Because yeah, you got away with it once, twice with your daughter and then your wife, but like third time's a charm. I don't know if that's gonna keep being okay, you know? Like, it's just like, okay. So then the book actually ends on such a sort of cliffhanger because the final thoughts is Margot and she's being attacked by Billy, and he's actually trying to like force her down to the basement, which is where her friend died when she was a little girl. And so Margot is saying this like speech in her head that she is gonna fight for all the girls and all the women who have ever been, you know, victims of this horrible thing, and she is going to fight back and nothing is going to take her down. And it's the end of the story. We don't actually know. We're assuming that because she was so filled with like inner power to like get out of that situation that she did whatever she had to get out, but we don't know. We just don't know. So I have a lot of questions. What happened to Margot? What happened to Pete, her friend? What happened to everybody? It was a really good book. I loved it, and I also was a little bit let down by the ending because I did think maybe this was a huge cover up by police. Maybe this was a cover up in that, because Margot felt like she was being followed the whole time she was in this town. I thought maybe Billy was slyly following her, and maybe he planted the evidence in that locker. But no, that was just like, it's just a bunch of different stories. Like, there was this murderer who murdered a bunch of girls, and then there was Billy and the murderer actually did stalk January. He just didn't get a chance to kill her because Billy was the killer of her, and Billy was also the killer of his wife, and the son is just an innocent bystander, and Uncle Luke is also innocent, but he has dementia, and it was a lot. It was a lot to take in. I was riveted. I could not put it down. I was knitting, listening, and like listening when I was going to bed, and then I'd get too scared and I'd stop listening, and I couldn't wait to wake up in the morning and listen again. I feel like it was such a good thriller with like some areas that could have been improved upon. So let me know what you think. That's my review. I love all books. Don't leave any negative comments. We love all books here. We love all genres. We love everybody. If you have like questions though, that's fine. We're just going to be very respectful, and I will link any makeup that you want to know down below. So thanks for watching. See you next time at Beauty and Book Club. Billy is not the dad of the twins. Luke. I just